In Kumasi, Ghana, Nalia Mensima was known as the quiet one. Mid-20s, always neatly dressed but in simple clothes that never stood out. No makeup, no fancy shoes. Her phone was old, the screen slightly cracked, and she never rushed to replace it. She walked calmly, spoke softly, and listened more than she talked. In a house full of loud voices, Nalia was easy to overlook. Her family had names for her. "You're too slow," one aunt would say with a laugh. "Life will pass you by." A cousin once shook his head and added, "She's too soft to succeed in this world." They said it casually like a fact, not an insult. And because Nalia never argued back, they took her silence as proof that they were right. At family gatherings, no one asked about her dreams. They asked others about business ideas, marriage plans, or travel goals. When Nalia spoke, people interrupted her. When she stayed quiet, they forgot she was even there. Sometimes she was sent on errands, sometimes asked to give up her seat, always expected to understand without complaining. But inside, Nalia carried a different kind of strength. She noticed everything. She remembered every word said about her, every small laugh, every look of pity. She just chose not to fight back. Not yet. At night, when the house finally went quiet, Nalia would sit alone, holding that old phone, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't dreaming loudly. She wasn't proving anything. She was simply waiting. And no one in that house understood that the girl they never took seriously was already becoming someone they would one day regret underestimating. The house in Kumasi was never quiet. From early morning until late at night, there was always noise. Someone arguing, someone laughing too loudly, someone complaining about life. Nalia lived there with her extended family, and every day felt crowded, even when she stayed silent in her corner. Most of her cousins were unemployed. They slept late, woke up angry at the world, and spent hours talking about plans that never started. One cousin wanted to open a big shop, but never saved a single cedi. Another talked about traveling abroad, yet couldn't afford transport to the next street. The aunties complained non-stop about food prices, electricity bills, neighbors, and bad luck. Everything was someone else's fault. Money was always a problem in that house. Almost every week, someone was borrowing from the neighbors. Small amounts, big promises. "I'll pay back next week," they would say, smiling. Next week never came. Still, they walked with confidence like life owed them something. Nalia watched all of this quietly. She woke up early, dressed simply, and left for work without making noise. Her job wasn't flashy. No big titles, no fancy stories. When she mentioned she worked at a logistics firm, people laughed. "So you're still doing that small job," an auntie once said, waving her hand. "That one won't take you anywhere," a cousin added, chewing ground nuts. Another laughed and said, "At least it keeps her busy. Better than sitting at home." They said these things while borrowing money from neighbors to buy food. They said them while owing rent. They said them while waiting for miracles instead of working. Sometimes, when Nalia came home tired, she would hear them counting other people's money. "If only I had capital," someone would say. Another would reply, "God will do it." No one ever asked how Nalia managed her transport, her meals, her quiet strength. There was no encouragement in that house. No one clapped for effort. No one respected consistency. Noise was mistaken for confidence, and silence was mistaken for weakness. Nalia often ate alone, listening to their voices rise and fall like a storm that never ended. She never joined the complaints. She never laughed at others. She simply observed, stored everything in her heart, and kept moving forward. They thought she was doing nothing with her life because she wasn't loud about it. They didn't realize that while the house was full of noise, Nalia was building something real, quietly, patiently, and without their support. Nalia never talked about her job, not because she was ashamed, but because she had learned that silence kept her safe. Every morning before the house fully woke up, she slipped out quietly, locking the door behind her without saying much. While others were still turning in bed or arguing about breakfast, she was already on her way to work, sitting by the window of a crowded trotro, watching Kumasi come alive. She worked at a logistics firm, the kind of place people didn't think much about unless something went wrong. There were no fancy offices or big announcements. Just long days, tight deadlines, and constant pressure. Nalia handled paperwork, tracked shipments, solved problems that arrived without warning, and stayed calm when others panicked. She learned quickly that being quiet didn't mean being weak. It meant listening, observing, and acting at the right moment. Her hours were long. Some days she left home before sunrise and returned when the streets were already dark. Night shifts became normal. While her cousins slept, she sat under bright office lights, checking delivery reports, answering calls, and fixing mistakes that weren't even hers. When systems failed, she stayed. When others complained, she worked. No one at home knew how tired she was, because she never said it out loud. Nalia taught herself skills after work. She watched online videos late at night, read documents on her old phone, and practiced until her eyes burned. She learned how to manage inventory software, how to communicate with clients, how to solve problems without drama. Sometimes the internet was slow, sometimes the power went out, but she kept going. She believed that effort, even when unseen, still counted. She never shared her salary. Not the amount, not the increases, not the bonuses. When her pay alert came in, she muted her phone and slipped it back into her bag. At home, people talked loudly about money, but Nalia handled hers in silence. She paid her transport, her food, her work clothes, and small personal needs without asking anyone for help. When bills came, she handled her share quietly and moved on. There were moments when it was hard. When she was sick and still went to work. When her feet hurt and her head felt heavy. When she wished just once that someone would ask, "How is your job?" But she reminded herself why she stayed quiet. In that house, information turned into entitlement. Success turned into demands. Silence was her protection. At night, when everyone else was asleep, Nalia lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in her head. She wasn't chasing praise. She wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She was building something solid, brick by brick, without noise. The job she never spoke about was shaping her into someone stronger than they could imagine. While they laughed at her small work, she was learning discipline, patience, and independence. And without knowing it, Nalia was preparing for a future where she wouldn't need permission, approval, or support from anyone who once doubted her. The day Nalia's secret slipped out didn't feel special at first. It started like any other evening in the house. Noisy and crowded. People were arguing over food, the television was too loud, and someone was complaining about money again. Nalia came home tired from work, dropped her bag, and sat quietly on the edge of the sofa, trying to breathe. Her phone vibrated softly. Just one short sound. Bank alert. She didn't rush to check it. She never did. But before she could turn the screen away, her cousin Kojo, who was sitting too close, leaned over without thinking. His eyes caught the screen for less than 2 seconds. That was enough. He froze. Then his eyes widened. "Wait. Nalia," he said slowly, his voice changing. "Is this your salary?" Nalia's heart dropped. She turned the phone face down immediately, but it was too late. Kojo stood up like he had seen a ghost. "Ei. Come and see this, oh," he shouted to the room. At once, the noise shifted. People stopped talking and leaned in. Aunties adjusted their wrappers. Cousins moved closer. Nalia felt every eye on her, heavy and sharp. Kojo said the amount out loud. The room went silent. For a moment no one spoke. Then whispers started, fast and confused. "Every month. This small girl. From that job we were laughing at." No one smiled for her. No one said, "Well done." No one said, "We are proud of you." Instead, their faces changed in a different way. Not respect, not joy. Calculation. An auntie let out a short laugh. "So all this time you were hiding money." Another cousin shook his head. "Ah, so that's why she doesn't talk." Suddenly, Nalia wasn't invisible anymore. People looked at her differently, like she had turned into something useful, like a solution. Questions started flying. "How long have you been earning like this? Why didn't you tell us? So you can help now, right?" Nalia sat there, quiet, her hands folded in her lap. She felt exposed, like her private life had been pulled into the open without her permission. The same people who laughed at her job yesterday were now leaning closer, their voices softer, their eyes brighter. The whispers grew into excitement. Plans started forming out loud. Someone mentioned school fees. Another talked about rent. An auntie smiled and said, "God has finally remembered this family." But not once did anyone ask how hard she worked. Not once did anyone ask if she was tired or happy or okay. Her success was not something to celebrate. It was something to use. That night, when the noise finally settled, Nalia lay awake with her phone pressed to her chest. The alert was long gone, but the feeling remained. She realized something painful and clear. The secret she had protected for years hadn't made them proud. It had only changed the way they saw her value. After that day, everything in the house changed, but not in a good way. Nalia could feel it the moment she stepped inside. The laughter sounded different. The smiles were too wide. People watched her closely, like they were counting something in their heads. Relatives started surrounding her more often. She sat outside, someone joined her. If she went to the kitchen, someone followed. Conversations stopped when she entered a room, then started again in low voices. She didn't need to hear every word to understand. They were talking about her money. One evening, an auntie cleared her throat and said it out loud, like she was stating a rule. "Family means sharing." Others nodded quickly, like they had been waiting for someone to say it first. Another cousin laughed and added, "What is money if not to help your own people?" Someone else said, "After all, we all suffered together in this house." Nalia listened quietly, her heart heavy. They spoke like her struggle never happened, like she had just woken up one day and found money waiting for her. Soon they started calculating her income right in front of her. "If she earns this every month," one said, counting on his fingers. "Then in 1 year," another interrupted, "That's plenty. She won't even miss small help." They said these things while looking at her, not even hiding it. Like her salary was already theirs to divide. No one asked how much she saved. No one asked about her plans. No one said the simple words she had never heard before: "Congratulations." Instead, they talked about what her money could do for them. School fees that were overdue. Rent that had been hanging for months. Phones that needed replacing. Business ideas that existed only in talk. Each request came dressed as a family duty. "You're not married yet," an auntie said. "What do you even need all that money for?" Another added, "God gave it to you through us. You must remember your roots." Nalia sat there, calm on the outside, shaking on the inside. She realized something painful. When they thought she had nothing, they laughed at her. Now that they knew she had something, they felt entitled to it. Her presence in the house was no longer as a niece or cousin. She had become a walking solution. Backup plan. An answer to problems she didn't create. That night, as she lay on her mattress, she replayed every word. The silence she once used to protect herself was now being used against her. They mistook her calm nature for weakness. They mistook her kindness for permission. Still, Nalia said nothing. Not because she agreed, but because she was thinking. Thinking about how quickly love can turn into expectation. Thinking about how no one celebrates your rise when they only see your value in what you can give them. In that moment, Nalia understood a hard truth. The laughter was gone, but it hadn't turned into respect. It had turned into entitlement. Once the idea settled in their minds that Nalia's money belonged to everyone, the demands didn't wait. They came fast, one after another, like she had opened a door she could no longer close. Started small. A cousin approached her one morning, smiling softly. "My sister's school fees are due next week," he said. "Just this once. You know family." Nalia nodded without answering, her stomach tight. Before she could even think, another voice followed. "My rent is behind," an auntie said later that day. "If the landlord comes again, it will be shameful." Then came the phones. Someone's phone was too old. Another needed a smartphone for business. They said it casually, like they were discussing groceries. Each request ended the same way. "You can handle it. We know." Business ideas arrived next. Not plans, not effort. Just ideas. An uncle sat her down one evening and spoke slowly, like he was doing her a favor. "I have experience," he said. "If you invest in me, we will all benefit." When Nalia asked simple questions, he frowned. Do you trust me or not? I'm your uncle. The worst was her aunt. One night, after everyone had eaten, she called Nalia aside. Her voice was calm, but her words were heavy. From next month, you will be giving me something small every month, she said. I raised you. This is your responsibility now. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. Nalia felt her chest tighten. She tried to explain that she had her own expenses, her own plans. The aunt's face changed immediately. So now you think you're better than us, she snapped. Money has entered your head. From that day, the pressure turned aggressive. If Nalia came home late, someone would comment loudly. She's enjoying her money outside. If she stayed quiet, they accused her of hiding things. Conversations stopped when she walked in. Doors were slammed. Respect disappeared. They reminded her of every small thing from the past. Food she ate, place to sleep, favors she never asked for. Everything was turned into a debt. Nalia started feeling trapped in a house that no longer felt like home. Her kindness was being squeezed. Her silence was being used as agreement. She felt tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. At night, she cried quietly, covering her mouth so no one would hear. Not because of the money, but because of the sudden change. Love had become pressure. Family had become a list of demands. And in that pain, Nalia realized something she had avoided for too long. If she didn't speak soon, they would take everything. Not just her money, but her peace, her future, and the life she worked so hard to build in silence. As the pressure in the house grew louder, Nalia's mind kept traveling backward. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, memories she had buried for years began to rise, clear and heavy. She remembered the little girl she used to be, the one who learned early how to stay quiet so she wouldn't be a burden. As a child, Nalia was often ignored, not in an angry way, but in a careless one. When food was served, she waited until others had eaten. When decisions were made, no one asked her opinion. If she did well in school, it was noticed for a moment and forgotten quickly. If she struggled, she was expected to handle it alone. She remembered asking for help once, softly, about school fees. The answer was always, "We'll see." Most times, "We'll see" meant nothing would happen, so she stopped asking. By her teenage years, Nalia started working small part-time jobs, selling snacks after school, helping at small shops, running errands for neighbors. The money was never much, but she counted every coin carefully. When school fees were due, she paid what she could without telling anyone. Sometimes she wore the same shoes until the soles gave up, because replacing them meant less money for books. There were nights she studied by candlelight when the electricity went out. The candle would burn low, wax dripping onto old notebooks. Her eyes hurt, her head felt heavy, but she kept reading. She didn't want excuses. She wanted a way out. While others slept, she whispered lessons to herself, afraid even her dreams might be too loud. No one sat beside her to encourage her. No one said, "You're doing well." When she passed exams, there was no celebration. When she failed something, there was no comfort. Silence was her companion, and sacrifice became normal. She learned to survive without applause. She learned to push forward without clapping hands behind her. Every step she took was built on effort no one saw and patience no one respected. That was why the present hurt so deeply. The same people who ignored her struggle now stood with open hands. They didn't remember the nights she cried quietly. They didn't remember the days she went hungry to save money. They didn't remember how she built herself from nothing. As Nalia lay awake, staring into the darkness, she felt anger for the first time. Not loud anger, but a steady one. She wasn't ungrateful. She was tired of being forgotten when she needed help, and remembered only when she had something to give. Those flashbacks reminded her of a truth she could no longer deny. She had always been on her own, and if she had survived all those years in silence, she could also learn how to protect what she had built, even if it meant disappointing the people who never stood beside her when it mattered most. The family meeting was called on a Sunday evening, the kind of time they chose when they wanted everyone present and no one to escape. Chairs were pulled into a circle. Faces were serious, But Nalia could feel the expectation in the air. They believed this meeting would end one way, with her agreeing. Nalia sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. Her heart was beating fast, but her face remained calm. She had spent many nights preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known it. Every memory, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led her here. One uncle cleared his throat and started talking about family unity. An aunt followed, listing needs like they were reading from a prepared script. School fees, rent, monthly support, business help. They spoke confidently, already dividing what they believed belonged to them. All eyes finally turned to Nalia. "So you understand," the aunt said. "You will help." The room was quiet, waiting for her usual silence. But this time Nalia spoke. "No," she said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. Just one clear word, steady and firm. The room froze. Someone laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Nalia took a breath and continued, her voice calm but strong. She explained that she worked hard for her money, that she paid her own bills, that she had plans, responsibilities, and limits. She said helping occasionally was different from being responsible for everyone's life. "I am not refusing because I am selfish," she said softly. "I am refusing because I need boundaries." Murmurs filled the room. An uncle accused her of forgetting her roots. An aunt said money had changed her. Nalia listened without interrupting, just like she always had. But this time she didn't shrink. She reminded them of the years she struggled quietly, of the times she needed help and none came. She didn't shout. She didn't blame. She simply spoke the truth. "I learned to stand on my own because I had no choice," she said. "Now that I can stand, I won't allow anyone to push me down again." The room grew tense. Some faces hardened, others looked away. They were used to her silence, not her clarity. Nalia ended by saying she loved her family, but love did not mean control. Support did not mean sacrifice without limits. She said she would help when she could, how she chose, not through pressure or entitlement. When she finished, the silence felt different, heavy, uncomfortable. For the first time, Nalia stood up without apology. She didn't wait for approval. She didn't ask for permission. As she walked away, her hands were shaking, but her heart felt lighter. She had finally used her voice. Not to fight, not to impress, but to protect herself. And in that quiet strength, Nalia understood something powerful. Saying no didn't make her weak or cruel. It made her free. Nalia didn't leave with shouting or tears. There was no big announcement, no final argument, no dramatic goodbye. She had learned that some exits are better made in silence. She started preparing quietly. One evening after work, she visited a small apartment on the edge of Kumasi. It wasn't fancy. Just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a window that let in soft morning light. But when she stood inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She paid the rent herself, signed the papers, told no one. On moving day, she packed her things into 2 bags. Documents, her old phone charger, a few notebooks filled with years of quiet effort. Early in the morning, before the house fully woke up, she stepped out. No one noticed at first. When they finally did, confusion turned into anger. Calls started coming in. Messages followed. "So you've left us. You think you're better now? This is how you repay family." Nalia didn't argue. She simply stopped sending money. No explanations. No long messages. Just distance. The small apartment became her safe place. She woke up without noise. Ate without fear. Slept without stress. For the first time, her salary felt like hers. Not a shared secret, not a family plan. At home, the relatives were furious. They called her selfish, ungrateful, proud. They told neighbors she had changed. They said money had ruined her heart. Nalia heard it all, but from far away. The words no longer controlled her. Some nights, loneliness tried to creep in. She missed the idea of family, not the reality. She missed who she wished they were, not how they treated her. Still she stayed firm. She paid her bills, decorated her small space, cooked simple meals, laughed softly at her own jokes, built routines that protected her peace. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Nalia didn't cut them off out of anger. She did it out of survival. And in that quiet decision she chose herself, without drama, without guilt, and without looking back. Months passed, quietly and beautifully. Life in her small apartment settled into a gentle rhythm. Nalia went to work, came home to peace, and slept without fear of being questioned or pressured. The noise she once lived with became a distant memory. At work things changed too. Her managers noticed her consistency, her calm under pressure, and the way she solved problems without drama. One afternoon, she was called into an office she had only passed by before. The conversation was short, simple, and life-changing. Nalia was promoted. She walked out holding the letter with steady hands and a full heart. There was no one to call immediately. No crowd to celebrate with. Just quiet pride, the kind that stays. Her life became softer. Bills were paid on time. Mornings were peaceful. Evenings felt safe. She smiled more. Rested better. The success she built didn't need to be shown. Could be felt. Then the messages started. Relatives who once called her selfish now sent long texts. "We misunderstood you. We were wrong. Family is family." Some asked for forgiveness. Some asked for another chance. Their words were softer now, careful, respectful. They spoke like people who finally realized what they had lost. Nalia read the messages slowly. She didn't rush to reply. She understood them, but she also remembered. She remembered the laughter, the entitlement, the pressure. She chose peace over explanations. Forgiveness didn't mean returning to old patterns. It meant moving forward without bitterness, and without opening doors that had once cost her so much. Nalia stood by her window one evening, watching the city lights, feeling grounded in herself. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need applause. Her success was untouchable because it was built in silence, protected by boundaries, and guided by self-respect. They laughed when I had nothing. They demanded when I had everything. That's when I learned the price of silence.